Okay, so I'm very nervous. So, okay, I'll start the intro. Welcome to episode 1 of Motherhood Around the World, a podcast that celebrates mums everywhere and dives into the nuance of parenting in different countries. Today we have with us Michelle. Born and raised in Perth, Australia, she currently lives near Versailles in France with her husband and 2 children ages 2 and 5. Originally trained as a teacher, she now works as an assistant maternelle, which means she runs a family daycare. I'm thrilled to have her as my first guest, as we have a lot in common. 2 Aussies living in France for the same age, both with young children. So much to discuss. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be your first guest. Very cool.
So tell me when you moved to Paris.
So originally I came to Paris in 2013. I had some holiday time. It was long service leave, so kind of an extended holiday break, sabbatical kind of time. Came for a holiday, loved it, and the idea came up to move here. And I laughed and said, that's ridiculous and that's never going to happen. And then as all good stories do, it kind of developed and became more of a real option in my mind. So then, yeah, I went back to Australia, kind of packed up things there, and then moved back a little while later to France for a year, only a year. And that was in 2014. And I'm still here now in 2024. So, yeah, nearly 10 years. I'm up to nearly 10 years.
Wow, so you've done all the admin of moving here, etc. That's all
Yes.
behind you
Oh, my
now.
goodness. Yeah. Well, I feel behind me, yes, I feel like that's still a very current thing in France in general. All of the fun admin that kind of comes into daily life living here.
Now, this is a question I get all the time when I tell people I live in France. Have you read the book Bringing Up Bibit?
I feel like that is the first question that people ask. I actually haven't. I've heard a lot about it, but I actually haven't read it.
Being far from Australia, but having your home in France, they say it takes a village to raise a child. What does your village look like?
I think it's one of those things that the more I've gone into this motherhood journey, the more I've realized the importance of that. I think at the beginning it sounded like a great idea, and then in the reality of day-to-day life, as time goes on, you realize the importance of it more and more. My in-laws live in France, so we are very close to them emotionally, as I get on really well with them. Our kids love spending time with them. They don't live really close. They're about 5-6 hours away in near the Alps, in Chambéry. So we see them as much as we can a few times a year. Love spending time with them. And when we're there, it's very much the whole family. We've got a number of young cousins now, so they all the cousins love spending time together, and that's a really great time. That when we go back to Australia again, all the family together. On a day-to-day basis, it's a bit harder. It's definitely been building our village around friendships, and it's changed a lot over the years. When my eldest was born 5 years ago now, we had a really close village. I had a really great mums groups of friends who I was close to at the time, friends from church, friends that I saw regularly a couple of times a week. So we had a lot of support there. That changed when my second was born. So my second was born in 2022.
What do they say? 1 is 1, 2 is 20.
That's true as well. That changed a lot as well. And I think there is a little bit of a difference too when you have 2 kids. When you're a family of 4, it is slightly different. I feel like it was a lot easier to ask a friend to babysit or to look after 1 child. I feel, and maybe that's just me, but I feel a little bit more apprehensive to ask a friend to look after 2 young children. It's a different ask. It was also post-COVID time. We just had a number of changes. We moved a bit further away. So we moved out of Paris closer to Versailles for a number of different reasons. And we enjoy where we are as well, but we moved a bit further away from people. So it was a lot harder to just pop in. Other friends moved away too, again, kind of linked with all of that going on at the time. A lot of people left Paris and were looking for different options, looking for more space, looking for that. So a lot of very close friends moved away. And it did change a lot. I felt that a lot harder with my second of not, we definitely didn't have that mums group or that regular friends that I could just catch up with for coffee with, during the week as often. I was easily.
I don't know if you find the same thing, but there's not a lot of mums groups in France. There's no baby Mozart. There's no,
Play
Wednesday morning
groups
play. Yeah,
and
Gymboree.
yeah. I did consider starting up a play group or looked at some different activities. I got very into kind of sharing play activities, started an Instagram account for play for young kids. So I did it in different ways. But I definitely was searching for that. I wanted to stay home with, well, both of my children were kind of for a little while, as long as possible. And I quickly realized that in France, that's not very common. So it is possible, but it's not as common. A lot of mums go back to work after the 2.5 months of paid maternity leave.
Yeah, I found the same thing. You go to the playground,
Yeah.
it's empty.
That's it. And so it's all kind of that cycle of the culture, because a lot of people go back to work, there's less activities available. So there's not a lot of just kind of, easy free play group or catching up with mums for coffee or things like that. There's not a lot of other mums who aren't working and have young kids to catch up with too.
I remember going to an English speaking mom's coffee when my son was quite small. And he was in the pram. And as we left, I said, On y va. This woman whipped her head around. She goes, Do you speak to your children in French? And I wanted to give her a really honest answer. So I paused and I thought, and I said, Oh, you know what? I do. I speak to them in English. It's just the phrases that I use all the time with the dog that automatically come out in French. That was my last interaction with sort of mum's coffee group.
It's not the same as I see my sisters had with their kids in Australia, and I guess, I mean, we all have that kind of ideal of what we imagine motherhood's going to look like. And for me, I thought it was
And
going
then
to be play
actually
groups
behind the
and
scenes,
coffee.
it's just a mess everywhere.
Everywhere around the world. I think that's it. It never looks exactly what you imagine it's going to
Yeah.
look like. So but that was a learning curve for me.
And circling back to talking about your in-laws, do they speak English or do you speak exclusively French with them?
So it's a little bit of a mix. I now speak exclusively French with them. They always speak exclusively French with our kids. My sisters-in-law speak a little bit of English. So, for example, we actually had a really lovely time. My brother and sister-in-law came from Australia to spend Christmas here with us in December, and so we all went down to my in-laws together for Christmas. So it was a real mix of the two families combined. So there are definitely some bits of English in there. So my sisters-in-law can speak English, so they'll speak with my family when they're here. But no, the rest is French. So lots of
My in-laws don't speak a word of English, and it's so funny because they don't actually know my real personality. They only know my French personality, which is not dimmed down, but
it's different.
it's simplified.
Yeah.
If you ask me in English what I thought about this book, I'll tell you, I really enjoyed the character arc of the protagonist, and I really can't wait for the film adaptation, and et cetera, et cetera. And in French, I just say, oui, c'était bien.
Exactly. It's not the same. It's not the same feeling. I've had that conversation with my husband a couple of times about it. I feel like you have a whole different personality in both languages. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your journey to pregnancy in France. Did you need access to fertility or special healthcare? Did you get the support you needed? Did you get information you needed?
We were quite fortunate to not really have fertility problems. It took us a little bit to get pregnant, not crazy long time. For my first, it was about 10 months of trying. So it felt long at the time.
Of course.
But in the grand scheme of things, and compared with other friends who had more difficulties, it really wasn't any problem at all. I found the French maternity system and the support and care really interesting. The fact that you're paired up with a midwife straight away, the fact that you can do your prenatal and antenatal visits with a midwife, that's all kind of covered with your healthcare provided. That was really wonderful and great. There was that continuity of care in that sense there. That's, I know, could be quite different elsewhere. There are a lot of things that were provided. The classes that were offered by the hospital, follow-up care afterwards for all of the perineal aftercare for after birth, and also abdominal muscle, all of that.
My doctor just said, "Do you wee when you laugh?" I said, "No," and she said, "You're fine."
Well, and mine was pretty good. I didn't have any problems, but the fact that that's actually paid for by the government is pretty huge.
Paid for by the government and very accepted. I think it's good that people talk about it. I did have this horrible experience in my first Pilates class back after, the 6-week mark where you can go back to exercise. So I went to Pilates class, very excited. And the guy just looked at me. He said, "Madame, you can't do this class pregnant." I said, well, that's lucky because the baby's at home with his father.
Oh,
And without
goodness.
skipping a beat, he said, "Et votre périnée?
Yeah.
Ça va?"
It's just like the standard.
Yeah, I was not expecting a middle-aged man to ask how my
No,
vagina was in
for
front of 12 other
sure.
women.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, at least we talk
Well,
about
that's it. Very, oh, yeah, very open, very much talked about, very much covered. I think that's a big, I think in Australia, definitely that's a big topic of conversation of the importance of that follow-up care for women.
how did you feel having midwife-led care? Because growing up, I mean, all my friends have had
Mm.
babies with a doctor-led care.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a bit of a shock to me, but I love my midwives. I still remember Lola and Sylvie, and I have
Yeah.
photos with them, and it was such a special way to give birth. But how did you feel about the whole circumstances?
Yeah, I think at the very, very beginning, I didn't necessarily know. I grew up in Australia where it was more, yeah, my own friends had doctors and obstetricians and gynecologists. That was like the standard. So I didn't necessarily know too much more as I started delving more into, I guess, what I wanted from my pregnancy, from birth. My husband and I were looking into that as well. And certainly did go down the path of wanting more of a midwifery style, open to different options of birth and that. And so then it was kind of a bonus that that was actually already the path that was offered in France. That's kind of the standard, that it's not, you don't have a doctor for the birth of your baby unless something goes wrong, basically, is kind of the thing here. So yes, I liked that side of it. I liked, yeah, I definitely had that connection with my midwife, and was happy to see her more regularly and have that continuity of care. I think that was pretty special. There were certainly other things that came up around birth that were, I guess, the things that were more standard here in France, that were not necessarily what I was hoping for or going for, or looking
So
for in birth.
yes, not too many. Once you have an epidural, it's on your back,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no moving
And
around.
that's
Yeah.
it. And so I wanted to have birth without an epidural, and that was kind of a surprise. That was not the standard thing here.
Did you do both without an epidural?
Yeah, I managed to do both without an epidural.
Bravo.
Thank you. A lot of preparation and mental preparation, definitely.
Mhm.
But yeah, certainly going into that, it was kind of, that was a strange thing for all of the people around me.
They don't even ask you. They just kind of
It's
schedule
just
you in
extemp
for
Yeah.
the anesthetist
Yep.
appointment, which
Yep.
I was all for. My first one was epidural. My second one, I became the horror story of the woman who was too late for an epidural.
I know. I think it's just like being open to have, like, to be able to have the choice in the matter. That was the tricky
100%.
part. And yeah,
Did you make any friends while you were pregnant? I know that's such a sort of something I was really looking forward to, and it was something that I just didn't really found existed here.
I thankfully, with both of my births, had a number of friends who were pregnant at a similar time. So either friends who I was very close to, or maybe slightly less close to, but then we became closer being pregnant together. That was really special, definitely. As I said, kind of the mums group that I had was a mums group kind of through church, but also was basically a group of my friends. Again, yeah, with my second, similar thing.
I was kind of expecting that, the classes when your husband sits there
Yeah,
patiently.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I asked my doctor, where do I sign up for that? And she just looked at me blankly and walked off.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. And so after you had your children, what happened next? Did you go straight home? Did you stay in hospital for a few days? Did you go and stay with family?
For both of my children, I stayed in hospital for a few days. It was an interesting process because I found it quite tricky being in hospital. Oh, I'm celiac as well. I have celiac disease. I'm gluten
Having
free.
comment,
Another thing that
yes.
we've chatted about as well. However, the hospitals don't necessarily provide very well for that, even though it is a medical condition, and basically my medicine is gluten-free food. I did everything I could beforehand to prep, to put it on my file, to ask them in advance to do all of that, and it wasn't provided for both times. Well, for my second, I was more prepared and I just took heaps of food. For my first, my husband just had to go and buy food for me every single meal so that I had things to eat. There were a couple of, not necessarily complications, but a couple of little things with my first that we were told we had to stay in hospital for longer. So we stayed in hospital for him for 5 days, and I was just ready to go home. I was just pleading with them to let me go home. The people were lovely. The people around me were lovely.
I think the standard is 4. I think I did 4 for the first, 3 for the second. I had to get like special, really plead my case.
And I think with the second two, I was all set. I was like, okay, here's my arguments. This is what we're going to check. We're going to do this. We're going to make sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, being in hospital, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you want to, I felt a little bit like I had to prove to them that I was allowed to go home, which is quite odd.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. And there was lovely support, and that was nice. It was nice to have that. Yeah, I think I just wanted to be in the comfort of my own home, and also definitely the food side of it was a big factor. With my firstborn, we had my parents who had arrived basically the day. So my parents arrived from Australia basically the day that I got induced. Another reason why I wanted to go home, because I didn't actually see them before they arrived at the airport, and I was having a checkup in the morning, and we were meeting up afterwards, and I didn't.
oh, so you hadn't planned to go in to be induced. You had just gone in for your little 40-week
No, not at all.
checkup.
No. Yeah, went in. Yeah, went in for my little checkup, and they said, no, you're not going anywhere. So thankfully they were there, and they were there to look after us and take care of us and cook and prepare food and all of that.
Did you find you got the support you needed feeding wise for the baby? I do love in France that it's really a fed is best sort of mentality, that if you want to breastfeed, they'll definitely give you their opinion. Uh, even if everyone has a different opinion. But I really liked that if you needed a bottle, they would give it to you straight away with no questions and no judgment at all attached to that, which was nice. How did you feel?
Yeah, I felt that I had support at the hospital. I probably did really most of my preparation for that elsewhere. Yeah, at the hospital they were like, okay, cool. Yeah, go for it. We'll do what you need. They're definitely open to options in the hospital.
And choosing names. So in France, it was a bit of a shock to me that you only have 3 days to register the baby's name. Did you have a list lined up? Did you go for more French names? Did you go for more Australian names?
Yeah, that's a good question. We with both of our babies, we didn't find out the sex beforehand, so we waited until birth.
So strange. Everyone, even my husband wanted to find out, and I was adamant that we wouldn't. And then, oh gosh, the poor obstetrician, she kept referring to le bébé. So I had a real go
Yeah.
at her. I said, look, I explained to you I didn't want to know if I was having a boy or a girl, and you keep saying le bébé, which tells me it's a boy. And she had to sort of sit me down and say, yeah, the word baby is masculine. Yeah, of course it is. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about your
Yeah.
baby. I'm talking about babies in general.
Yeah, the babies in general. No, people found that so strange when we told them here that we weren't finding out the sex, and they were like, but how? But what? And like really freaked a lot of people out. They really were very confused. How will you buy? How will you buy clothes
I
for the
didn't
baby?
find out because I wanted to save on the shopping.
Yeah, that's very smart. No, so our lists lined up to boys and girls names. As it got closer, we're pretty sure, give one or two options for each, and we wanted to meet our babies and then decide. With our firstborn, then yeah, they're quite pushy to kind of, okay, what's the name and what are you calling him? So I remember with my firstborn, we were in like literally had
And they
just
come up to
delivered
you with the little book, right?
my
Yeah.
eldest. They were like straight away, so what is he called? What's his name? And I remember feeling a bit of pressure. Like we talked about it. We knew we wanted to meet him. We wanted to have a conversation. I'd literally just given birth. There's people running around everywhere doing all the checks and all the bits and pieces of that. And they're saying, what's the name? What's the name? And so having this kind of whispered conversation with my husband, private, around quite an important like decision. And with my second, then we're like, okay, when they ask, we're not saying anything. We're taking some time. We're going to go back to our rooms later and quietly decide. So yeah, we were a bit told that we definitely wanted names that worked in French and worked in Australian English, as in they were, going to, whether our children were living in France or living in Australia, it wasn't going to be too strange or too unknown. When it's something that wasn't necessarily super common, but that was understood in both languages, and that it also wasn't said completely differently, because you can have the same name that sounds completely different in French or in English.
Yes. I wanted to call my son Atticus.
Adequate.
And then my husband said Atticus, and that was off the list forever.
As soon as they say it in a different way, yeah. And we had names too. I was like, I love this name. And then my husband was like, oh, that sounds like this in French. You're like, okay, well then that's gone.
Yeah, because we didn't discuss it. Your husband is French, isn't he?
My husband is French. Husband's French, born in France. All my family, all my in-laws, my family, yeah, all very, very French. As a teacher as well, I felt like I had quite a number of names. I was like, oh, that name reminds me of a child who I taught. Yeah. Or that name was a lovely child that I taught. Yeah, it definitely was quite a specific list of names that worked in both languages for sure.
And once you got home, what was your maternity leave situation? Did you take the allocated? Because in France, it's 18 weeks legally for first and second child, and then 26 for the third. When I had mine, it was only 2 weeks paternity. I have just been told it's increased to 5 now.
Yeah, we just got into that.
Yeah. So you got the 5?
We just slid into the
Excellent.
extra paternity leave. Yes, that was great.
So what did you end up doing? Just taking the 18, or you took extra afterwards?
For both of my children, actually, I took the full paid maternity leave, and then I took what's available, which is 6 months paid parental leave, but it's a much smaller paid amount. We just decided as a family that we would choose
Figure it
to
out. Yeah.
figure it out. Exactly. Did what we could to kind of make that work. For our first, my husband had the 2 weeks paid paternity leave, and for the a second, we slipped into the new laws, so we got the 5 weeks paid paternity leave. So he took that. My husband took that straight away. My parents came over a little bit later when my second was born. COVID blocked that a little bit. They managed to come about 6 weeks later. But so that was very, very beneficial that my husband then had that time. My mother-in-law actually came up around that week, 2 weeks when my second was born. So then to help out with my eldest. So she was there, thankfully, when we went to the hospital.
And once you went back to work, I mean, this is a very specific question for you because you work in early childcare.
Yeah.
When you went back to work, what were your childcare options? Were they affordable? Did you have any stigma around either taking more time off or going back to work, either way? And what did you end up choosing for your family?
Yeah, so definitely, Francis, as you were saying before, I think there's a lot. It's just more common for mothers to go back relatively early. This after the standard 2.5 months of maternity leave. It's quite common for mothers to go back then. I found in terms of stigma, I found only the stigma of it was quite strange for me to be say from my first. I didn't start working again until he was about 18 months. Part of that was COVID, and to be at the park as a mum of a 1-year-old, 18-month-old, and not be working was a strange kind of phenomenon at the time. So I had a lot of kind of questions about like that. I feel like it's the first question straight away in the park or anything from parents is, so what kind of childcare situation to have. So I was like, oh no, he's at home with me. Even doctor's appointments, anything like that. No, he's at home with me. Oh, okay, all right. It was a strange kind of it was strange for people to hear that.
Again, I think it's a little chicken and egg, isn't it? Because the system is is set up to support working mothers. Therefore, mothers can go back to work, and that's what they choose to do, which is great.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, it's also possible, but it's definitely, women do tend to go back quite quickly here.
Yeah. And exactly like you say, it's that cycle of it. There is childcare available. It is relatively affordable, a relatively good price. You do have to get in early, but there are quite good options of childcare available here. And because everyone does it, that is kind of the norm. And so it then becomes strange not to. Whereas I guess like my sisters all stayed home with their children until pretty well they went to school. I had a lot of friends do that. So I feel like in Australia, changed a bit, certainly more recently, but definitely many of my friends and family stayed home with their children until certainly a bit older, at least 1 full year maternity leave, or maybe when they were going to school. And so again, it's the cultural kind of norm of that's the cycle.
And also chicken and egg in Australia as well. I mean, the childcare, I'm not sure if you would call it affordable nowadays.
No,
you have 2 kids,
really expensive for sure.
You're working just to break even, just to pay for the childcare. So it does make sense for a lot more women to stay at home.
Definitely that impacts it. Yeah.
I think in the UK at the moment, they're having a real problem where there's actually just a shortage of healthcare, childcare providers. So even if you want to go back and it is something that you want to pay for, even finding a place is so difficult.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that where I live at the moment. There's been way more buildings have been built. There's way more people who've moved to the area. It's had a huge influx, even in kind of Versailles and the little town where I am at. So there is, but you have to book in you have to ask or apply for a childcare place when you're pregnant. As an assistant maternelle now, I'm getting calls from people who are like, yep, just found out I'm pregnant. Do you have a place for me and my baby who will be 3 months old in basically a year's time? There's a huge demand. So yeah, I think it's starting to, in certain areas, it's definitely starting to become less easy to find a place, even though it is thankfully affordable.
So just to explain for anyone who doesn't understand, an assistant maternelle, you have 4 children.
You can have up to 4 children. Yeah, it's a very kind of official process.
And that's regulated by the state and subsidized like a normal daycare would be.
Yes. Yeah.
And how does it work for the food in that situation, actually? Because at the creche, all the food is fully prepared and organized. Does that work for you? Is it like that for you as well? Or are you?
Yes. Basically, I'm kind of in charge of preparing kind of everything in terms of like the activities, all of that. It's one of the things that really appealed to me, was having a bit more flexibility in how I organize my day, doing things that I enjoy. Food wise, I prepare meals for the families, and then they pay for that, like you would pay at the creche, the daycare. There is the option that they could provide their own food. They could provide a lunchbox, but usually I find it easier to just prepare it myself, and it's easier for the parents. They're usually quite happy to do that. It's definitely, that's something here in France that's the norm of most people are used to having, not preparing lunchboxes for their children.
Oh yes, I actually have a friend who moved back to it. She was living in France. She moved back to Australia. She's ready to have kids, and the prospect of making lunches every day upset her so much. She's moved back to France.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
She just thought, that's going to save me 12 years time, half an hour a day.
Yeah. And it is a big job. And at the same time, I had a moment where I was a little bit like, I loved kind of my mum preparing lunchboxes, and it's just like not allowed here. You are legally not allowed to bring in other food to your children's school unless there's allergies or other things, and that's a whole other issue.
Even my teenager, so if she wants to eat not at the canteen, she has to leave the campus.
Yeah.
So she has to go and sit in the park across the road.
With a lunchbox.
There's no sneaky sandwiches.
No, it's a very different process.
I do find the French system with kids eating what's prepared for them, I do think that they are more a little adventurous with food.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if they refuse it at home. When I went to go pick them up from the creche, it was, well, he really liked his mackerel. He ate his cucumber salad. He didn't really like his quinoa, but we had Morbier cheese for dessert. He ate that, and this sort of circles back to the bringing up Bebe book. I have a friend in the US, and she read the book. She called me in despair. She just said, I'm doing everything she says. I don't understand. I said, but you don't have the entire support of the state system to help you deliver as a mother. You don't have affordable childcare. Your children are not fed nutritious meals at school. I mean, my kids came home toilet trained. What a dream. Just came home and said, I need some underwear. I'm done with nappies. I was like, you know what? I can help you with that. I can play my part in this. Your oldest is in school now. So he's in
moyenne section, so the equivalent of 4-year-old kindergarten, I guess. Kindergarten will probably be the closest. It's like here it says second year of early learning.
And actually, that's an interesting point, because in France, school is mandatory from the age of 3. Which I personally, it suits me. But I do also I know a woman who moved to Hawaii. She was like, I'll be back when I'm ready. I'm not ready to send them to school yet. So I do think it's an interesting topic that you don't have the choice.
Yeah, definitely. But even the conversations in the park sometimes, very much one way or the other, just seems so young to be going to full days, 8:30 to 4:30. Canteen, eat lunch at the canteen, school. It's not like in Australia, they might, if they're starting at 4, it's half days kind of thing. It's not, or 2 days a week or something. It's not full days like that.
And toilet trained, which is a bit of pressure on parents.
And that's another argument that parents have, because sometimes you've got a child who is 2.5, and they're very strict on that. It generally depends on the school, but generally they're very strict on they must be toilet trained to come to school. So it puts a big push on parents to toilet train that summer before school.
Oh yeah, like pre-September panic.
Yeah, yeah,
This is a tough one. What do you do if your kids are sick? You know that feeling. They come to you at 4 a.m. and they
yeah,
have a temperature, and you know tomorrow is the day, the one day of the week you have something completely unavoidably important, and your husband does as well.
yeah. And I would say I thankfully haven't had too many sick days. My eldest doesn't get sick very often, thank goodness. I'd say the grève is the one that gets me the most, the strikes. I feel like the beginning of the year they do one or two, and then after that it's not too bad. It's more the canteen and things when they have strike and you have
So I'll just explain quickly for anyone listening who doesn't understand. In France, the school hours, which is 8:30 till 11:30, and then from
1:30.
1:30 till either 3 or 4:30, depending on the day, that's managed by the school. And then the time in between, so lunchtime, and if they're in the youngest grade, nap time,
Yeah.
and anything after the school day, if you pay for after school care, is all managed by the city of Paris or the city where you're in. So you actually have two teams of people looking after your children, which is wonderful, except they quite often decide to go on strike on different days. So some days you have to pick up your kid for lunch and bring them back.
Hmm.
Some days they're on strike the whole day. Sometimes, when you're lucky, no one's on strike.
Yeah.
My kids love strike. They ask me. It's
Oh,
like
really?
Sunday. Like,
Oh, I think it is. It's like the equivalent of snow day.
yeah,
I hear that
maman,
too.
maman, c'est quand les
Yeah.
prochains grèves?
Yeah, it's fun. That was a big learning curve for me. It was quite bad last year when there were a lot of strikes, and it was like between December and April. My son had nearly a day off a week, and that was full on. And I found that quite hard too because, yeah, you kind of get to holidays and it's like, now they're home full time, but I'm still working, and they've had them there every day.
And school holidays are such a shock over here because in the creche, they're just in the creche all year.
Yeah,
They take, what, 2 weeks in summer and 1 week at
yeah,
Christmas, which
yeah,
is completely feasible. And then they go to school. And I mean, I had someone trying to book me for tours, and
yeah.
bless, every time she emails me, I'm like, I'm really sorry, the kids are going to be on holiday. She's like, do they ever go to school? And it is. So it's 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off,
Approximately, yeah, yeah,
plus what, 10 weeks in summer.
yeah. Yeah, so it is, yeah, it is quite a few. Plus all the you got all your public holidays in that in the last term. But no, there's
Got
quite a
May
few
coming
days
up
there.
with all
Yeah,
the
yeah, with all of those. Yeah, there's a bit of juggling back and forth there sometimes. It's not always easy, but no, I am grateful for the job that I can do to be more available for that kind of thing.
my children's creche was in the Jardin de Luxembourg. So they built a temporary creche in there
Oh
while they
wow.
were renovating
Okay.
the actual creche.
Right.
It was just amazing.
Yeah.
Until they would call you and say that the creche is closing due to wind.
Oh, because the whole park closes.
Yeah. So you would be having a nice day, doing your work,
Yeah.
and then suddenly it gets a bit windy and the park's closed and you have to dash over. And there was no
Yeah.
sort of time limit. You had to be there in
Yeah.
20
You had to be
minutes.
there then. Oh, that's hard.
Yeah. So that was a fun one. And try
Yeah.
explaining to someone in a meeting, I'm really
There's
sorry,
a
I
bit
have
of
to leave.
wind.
Yeah. It's a bit windy outside.
Oh my
And they would
goodness.
look out the window and just kind of look at you like you had grown a second head. It's one thing I do think, though, in France is great is that you do have so many holidays built into your job. So, for example, my husband has, regular job full time, but he has 7 weeks holiday. So if there is a sick day, he can take a day without having to sort of
Yeah.
think that, oh my gosh, that's it. We can't
Yeah.
celebrate Christmas together now because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
I've
that is
taken all my
definitely
days.
definitely very fortunate. There is also then some leave around. It depends on the workplace too, but like if your child is sick, there is some leave that you can. And myself as an assistant maternal, and also my husband, he could take a day off because it's specific leave for a sick child or
Yeah.
things like that. So it's definitely very beneficial. And even the benefit then, I think post COVID is there's a lot more working from home. Again, it's working from home, but you can
Yeah.
make it work to fit around other things.
Juggling from home, I think we call it. Do your children do any activities, any extracurriculars? I find that's a really interesting question in France because there's not a lot of there's no pressure
Oh yeah.
to do extra activities. What do you think?
I was gonna say I feel like it's quite common though that they do extra
Wednesdays?
activities. Yeah, Wednesdays. And I mean, that's one benefit of, having so they are at school 4 days a week and they don't have school on Wednesdays. And then there are heaps of options for activities on Wednesdays. My son at about 3, just before going to school, started doing kind of the equivalent of like a baby gym, but it was an option offered by our local council. So that was a great thing. He loves doing that on a Wednesday morning, and it just recently changed, and so now he's doing a multi-sports is what they call it. It's like where they do a selection of different sports on a Wednesday afternoon. He loves that.
Yeah, the Wednesday stuff is great. And I think it really speaks to the French culture that French parents are not signing up to Little League on Saturdays.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not, their weekend is their weekend for family stuff, but parent-led family stuff, maybe an exhibition, etc. Nothing's going to stop them from going to their country house for the weekend.
Yeah. And certainly Sundays, definitely. I feel like I don't think there's any sport or activities offered on Sundays.
I've become French. I just can't bear
the Saturday morning
signing up to Saturday morning classes. It has to be on a Wednesday or we're not doing it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that one. But yeah, definitely Sundays are off limits. Sunday's very much family day here in France. So
nice that more things are open on Sundays now, though.
Yeah, that's true.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
What languages do you speak in your household, and who speaks what with who?
Good question. So we decided pretty early on that I would speak English with our children, that my husband would speak French. That's kind of the rule in that sense. And in the day-to-day reality, it can get mixed up a little bit. Our family language then is kind of more French, but a lot of franglais. So it's a lot of mixed. And
isn't it so cute when the kids like mix it in the sentence?
It's really cute. I mean, my little 2-year-old, who's really like putting more and more words together, and I think he's got a funny mix of. My eldest decided he was going to start talking to my youngest in French at some point, and I was a little bit like, "Oh,
I've lost it." Yeah, I lost
it. I was like, "Oh, I'm a bit sad," and at the same time, I'm really happy for them, and I think that's really sweet.
I have found my language of discipline is French. So I speak to them in English all the time. And then as soon as someone's standing on a table or doing something dangerous, it's immediately in French. So I don't know if that says something about me psychologically, or whether it's just that I know that the children will react quicker in French.
Yeah.
I think it probably goes back to that whole 2 different personalities as well. So
for sure.
Mummy's French personality is coming out. What is the split on housework in your family? Who does what?
It's changed so much. So I mean, I guess it's always going to change too with different seasons and that as well. Because I'm home more during the day and I'm more with the kids, I'm doing more of the day-to-day stuff, day-to-day things now. However, there's a lot of work to be done to kind of to set up as well, even just to set up our house for my job. So our evenings tend to be a lot of working together to do all of the daily things that need to be done.
What time do your kids eat? Do you all eat together?
I think I'm more Anglophone in that sense, more Australian. We've always eaten quite early and the kids go to bed quite early. And I know with certainly other French family, well, it depends. Now it's kind of juggled with work and that. So but we don't tend to eat all together around about 6:30 to 7. And then
is early.
So that's but then that's like late for Australia, and I find so it's somewhere in the middle too. And then the kids are in bed by 8 at the latest. Generally, but they're pretty exhausted then, and then they tend to wake up at 6. They wake up like Australian kids. They don't wake up like French kids.
Mine wake up like French kids. During school time, they're in bed at 9. I'd say they're not asleep till 10.
Okay.
And they wake up by 7:15. You know what? You got to pick your battles.
That's it. And you got to work out what works for you. I mean, that works for us too. My husband and I enjoy having that time then in the evening. So we have that time, together while doing dishes and doing laundry.
Yeah. So back to the split.
Yeah. So our evenings then are a lot of doing dishes, doing the laundry, getting the house clean and reset for the next day. That's a kind of a big job because of my work.
So you work quite as a team on everything.
For that, definitely more of a team. And the weekends he'll do more cooking or things like that. And then even on the weekends we'll try and kind of share a bit of One of us will have a sleep in, the other one will kind of take the kids for a bit or take them out while the other one does something else. So we do try and have that to have some time.
I do remember being very judgmental of people who did that before I had kids. Why do you have to split, divide and conquer to look after them? And now I'm like, bye, honey. Go to the market. I'll be back in about 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah. I guess everyone's different and you have different seasons where it's important too. But yeah, we definitely, it fits back into the village part too. My sisters-in-law, even when we're there, we'll just be like, okay, I'm just going to the shops. I'm dropping off my kid at grandma's house so I can just go and do the shopping. And we don't have that. So yeah, we divide and conquer amongst ourselves. And
how do your kids eat? So do you do one meal? You said you all eat together. So you're cooking just one meal, or are you doing a meal with modifications? Are you doing, chicken nuggets?
No, pretty well. Food for us is our kids eat really, really well, and we've always been pretty chilled about food. And I think that it's not always the only thing, but I think that's made a big difference. With certain things that we do with them of not adapting the meal. We prepare a meal that everyone will eat, and that's the meal, and don't kind of second order cook or that kind of thing. Certain different things, but then we're also very chilled about you eat what you want to eat. This is the meal. You eat how much you want to eat. If you don't feel like eating, if you're not hungry, that's totally fine. No pressure.
Your job is to get the meal to the table. Their job is to decide.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have cheese after every meal?
We do very much have our French cheese box that's in the fridge with a number of different cheeses in there that we bring out the box. Like all of those things are very different from what we grew up with in Australia, where in Australia you buy one
cheddar in the fridge.
Yeah. And if you're having cheese for a fancy occasion, it's like, here's the cheese that I've prepared that we're eating for this meal. And it's finished at the end. So yeah, the whole idea of a cheese box where you have multiple cheeses inside, you cut off a slice and that's it was a new phenomenon for me.
These little Frenchies, they need options. My daughter is very demanding about her cheese requirements. They'll pick exactly which one they want. No, mummy, I don't want that goat's cheese. That one's too dry. I prefer a fresher goat's cheese. Like, who are you?
I know, but my children, even tonight, they had some baguette and cheese, and it was, Papa, I want the some for this one. Is this the some for this one? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, like, how do they know these names of these cheeses? I did not know this when I was a kid. No,
I still don't know them all. I remember one tantrum over truffle cheese that will never live down.
Hang on, was that the kids or was that you? Because truffle cheese is good. I would throw a tantrum over that if that was gone.
I would like to make it clear that I would never usually buy truffle cheese for my 3-year-old. But we had a dinner party and we had truffle cheese left. So we went in a cheese box and we were eating it for the next few days. And when we ran out of truffle brie and went back to regular brie, there was an incident.
That's hard.
Are your kids involved in grocery shopping? Are they interested in cooking? Do you do any of that together, or are they sort of, playing while you get that done?
We have, I don't know if you know the Femme de Galley, but it's quite a well-known farm.
Haven't been, and it's so on my list.
It's 5 minutes from our house, so it's pretty cool.
To visit you.
Yeah, there we go. We'll do that. We'll book it in. It's a farm basically. My husband calls it the farm for Parisians. Like it's is where a lot of like Paris families come to kind of get their farm fill. But the nice thing is that there's a picking farm, markets, and an animal farm and all that. And we really enjoy going to the picking farm, and it's great for them to learn, how things are grown, how we pick them, when are they available, all of those kind of things. So that's definitely helped as well with seasonality. And also just they love going to the picking farm and choosing. They're actually literally picking that off the bush, off the tree, off the ground, and seeing how it's grown and where it comes from, and definitely helps them see that whole process of
the cycle,
farm to table, and they really enjoy that as well.
What does a typical weekend look like for you as a family?
Well, we talked about taking time for each other, so that's definitely part of it. It can be so different from week to week, and I think we've tried to definitely my husband and I have had conversations more recently about trying to find time that works for our family. Not necessarily every single weekend, but kind of say looking at the couple of weekends ahead, and that we're that we can get to the end of the weekend and feel rested before going back into the new week. Because we have had a couple of weekends where we just, they got filled up with different things, and we got to the end of Sunday and we're just exhausted. So we try to be a bit better with that. So looking at, say, the couple of weekends coming, and see if we can catch up with friends somewhere, whether that be invite people over to our place or go and visit someone or catch up at a park somewhere just for a play date. Sometimes it is doing some necessary things like popping to the shops or getting some practical things like that. But we try and have some time for each other, or time to, like, I'll go see a girlfriend for brunch or coffee, or things like that. And then that's really important too. I mean, like, when I go and see a friend for brunch, or especially go into Paris, it's a little bit more of a trek these days. It might be kind of most of the day out, but then the boys get to have boys time with Papa, and they love that too. So it's nice to have that mix as well.
How do you think society views kids in France? Are kids welcome everywhere? Do you feel like you need to go to sort of kid-friendly restaurants or cafes? Are people helpful? Did people help you carry the pram when you were when you were on public transport?
I think there's a mix in France, because there's definitely helpfulness, and like helping carry the pram, helping get on and off the train. I think that's people are always very helpful with that. I think that's also a shared understanding. I mean, so many times I feel like I had a man or a lady, that who maybe similar age, who would stop and would literally say, "Oh, I'm helping. I know what it's like. I've been there. I'm a dad. I'm a mum." For us, maybe it's not necessarily the how kids are viewed, but more just the practical nature of what's available. Sometimes we find quite tricky here, trying to find a space where we can go and say, eat or have a coffee or catch up with friends. We've got two very energetic boys, and they need space to run and play, and they don't do well sitting down. We pick and choose what we ask them to do as well. I don't necessarily think they need to. For us, it wasn't a priority that they need to learn to sit through a meal and be quiet and do that. So it's not necessarily the way prioritize.
What are your favorite traditions in France?
Mm. I think something I love in France, I've discussed this recently with family too, so it's come straight to mind. In France, there are so many holidays around food and around special occasions around related to food, and everybody celebrates. So whether your kids are in daycare or in school or at work or anything like that, everyone celebrates, and it's like the whole country stops, in order to celebrate, or the whole month is devoted to that. So I mean, classic example, the galette de roi, the king's cake, which is in January. Every single child at school and every single child at daycare, and we, I made, with the kids I look after, I made one. We made one together, and then we ate it. My husband did that with his workmates, with his colleagues. It was part of the lunch a couple of days, and then also they did it together. It was this celebratory event of eating a special cake for a special occasion through the whole month of January. And I find that pretty incredible and really fun, and it brings everyone together. And I don't think that's necessarily the same elsewhere. And there's multiple of those, all throughout the year.
Yeah, I do love that they, instead of denying themselves things in January, they have a specific cake.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for January.
That's available the whole month round. Yeah.
Lean into extra cake in January.
Yeah.
There's a lot I could say about making friends at the school gates with French moms, but I don't want to be negative. So have you found it easy to make friends in France? You've got quite a tight mum circle. Do you have a lot of French friends in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, that's evolved as my children have grown older, and even as our circumstances have changed. So definitely early on was probably more international, anglophone, some French mum friends, but more through mutual friends and that kind of thing. I think that changed a lot when my son first started school. That seemed to be a big change, with getting to know other mums and other families. And it depends. There's certainly some that I feel closer to, and others, and sometimes some I can carry on, I can chat to all the time, or we'll text and catch up outside of the activities, and others it's just a hi and a little bit of a chat at school, or even just birthday parties and things like that, being able to catch up with other parents there.
French birthday parties, I love it. You show up, you're offered a glass of champagne and you leave your children and you go and have some freedom for 2 hours. What a concept.
Well, that was a funny thing. So I feel like that really hit us last year when my son was having his 4th birthday party. And I found out from another mum friend who was kind of like, hey, just to let you know, this is kind of the age where sometimes the parents start to drop off their kids. And I was like, what? Huh? What are you talking about? So yeah, that was a new concept. But then I found, I mean, even so then, yeah, I chatted with a couple of parents for his 5th birthday party. My son just turned 5 last week. We had a party, and a couple of them kind of said, oh, we can stay or we can go, and kind of figured it out. And because there was only like 1 or 2 parents, then I actually had really good conversations with them and got to know the ones who did stay then a little bit better. And that was kind of fun as well too.
What do you love the most about being a mom in France?
Oh, that's a good question.
Broad. Go as broad as you want.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of like, well, actually, and because at first I just said, what do you like the most about being a mum? And then I was like, oh, and in France too. What do I love most about being in general? I think is just seeing my boys grow and develop and discover new things and learn new things, and seeing their little minds work as they discover something new. Maybe that's an in general one. In France, maybe as well, or maybe it's like with both languages. I think it's fun seeing them discover how 2 languages work and how to put it together, and seeing their little brains work when they speak to in one language and to mommy, my French mother-in-law, in another language, and see how quickly they switch between the two. I find that quite incredible. So
What's your biggest fear of raising kids in France?
I don't know if it's a fear. I'd love our children to be able to really be who they are, and to really be themselves, and to feel open and confident to do that. No matter what, no matter what they're faced with school and with other opportunities that they're able to be given, not have to say fit into a very, tiny or small mold.
My final question is, are there any funny animal noises in French that aren't the same in English?
Oh my goodness. This is such a fun conversation, I think, between French and English. Some classics are the rooster, which in English we'd say says cock-a-doodle-doo, and in French says cocorico. I think my classic favorite one is a frog, though. A frog, which in English says ribbit, ribbit, or something like that. And in French, oh goodness, I've forgotten.
Oh yeah, in French it goes quack quack.
That's it. Yeah. So very more, I would say, like a duck kind of sound or something of what.
Well, which is so funny because ducks in French don't say quack quack; they say quack quack.
Quack quack. Yeah, and again, written very different. It's like COIN, I think, like that. So
yeah,
very different. Yeah, reading a book with farm animals is hilarious. Trying to understand them all. So yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me, especially for my first episode. And I look forward to catching up with you in Paris again soon.
Yay, thank you so much for having me, Emily. It was really fun to chat and to find out a little bit more about our kids and also different ways to experience motherhood all around the world. So thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks so much for listening to our first episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate, review, and subscribe, which will help other people find us. See you next week.